Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmatacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shankaram Shankaracharyam Kesavam Badarayanam Sutravasya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punaha. Good. Aparokshanubhuti, and we've gone past the 100 pages of notes, which of course you've digested fully by now, but can anybody remember a single iota of what we talked about last week?
That a jnani does not have prarabdha karma,
Jnani
incur or influenced by the phalam.
Yes, or influenced by the phalam. So, and this is a bit strange. That was the main thing that we discussed last week. It's a bit strange because, of course, up until now, all the teachings for all of those who have been in my classes, you've understood that we've said that when a jnani attains Atmayanam, Brahmayanam, then at that point becomes a jnani, becomes knowledgeable about the ultimate reality, becomes a jivan mukta, somebody who's enlightened while alive, realized while living. And then that way he goes, and for him, what did we know about jivan mukti from past studies? We knew that 2 of the 3 karmas dissolve away. Can anybody remember the 3 karma types first of all?
Sanchita, Agami.
Sanchita, Agami. So Agami are the Agami karma phalam, is to give it its total title. Let's just call it Agami. Agami is the consequences of the actions we're taking in this life as a result of our pure will. Those have consequences. If the consequences aren't exhausted within the life itself, then they're accumulated into Sanchita. So Sanchita forms the accumulated total of all of our karmic results, if you like. And from that, a withdrawal is made, almost like the Sanchita becomes too big to contain itself, and it almost bursts, and it's a withdrawal is made of punya and papam from the Sanchita, and that collective is known as prarabdha, and it's the basis of the prarabdha karma that we attain this body, and this life is designed to be able to exhaust the prarabdha karma with which we were born. All right, that designs our life. It's not God that says you're going to be tall, you're going to be short, you're going to be ugly, you're going to be beautiful. It's we decide that because our bodies, the environment we come into, the faculties that we have are designed to be able to exhaust the prarabdha karma that we have inherited on birth. So that's the story we always say. What happens to prarabdha? And up until now, what did we say about prarabdha? What happens when you get knowledge? What happens to prarabdha?
When it's you die.
Yeah, when prarabdha finishes, you die, and therefore, in order to encourage you to carry on coming to classes, we've always said that don't worry about being realized souls, because you aren't going to drop dead at that aha moment, as Oprah would say it. So you are going to carry on, and you'll be a jivan mukta. So don't worry about that. The prarabdha continues, and that's why the jnani lives on. When the prarabdha exhausts, like everybody else's prarabdha exhaustion, the body comes to an end and a new body is born. Okay, but for a jnani, there is no new body because the Sanchita Agami has been destroyed. There is no place from which a new birth comes. So What did we say last week that was so counter to that view?
So there were two aspects to this. I just want to say, Ram, this is such a big thing. I remember it from doing it in the lockdown. It's
Right.
such a big reveal, this thing.
Yes.
There's two aspects. So you've got a Yanni knows that they are not the doer. They are the akata, the non-doer.
Right. Yes.
So the doer belongs to the body, the actions, the karma phalam. And so if you are not the doer, you are Atman. So the Atman, there is no Parabdha. There's no karma at all, including Parabdha. And the second aspect is the fact that a Yanni knows, understands Atma Satyam and Mithya Anatma.
Right.
So the body and mind are Anatma.
Yes.
The action and the results of action belong to the bodies, the three bodies, actually. And so how can you have one little aspect left over if everything is anatma? Apart, all you're left with is atma.
Good. Okay, that is the understanding, but I'm sure it was more tricky for some of you than for Will. Will's been at it for 10 years, so he actually, and he studied Aparokshanubhuti with Sarvapriyananda over lockdown, so he's been through the verses quite recently. So that's why, but as you said, it's quite a big thing, even in that, isn't it? Even in his talks there. So questions from other people, please. Things that
yes.
people to understand.
Plenty of questions.
All right, let's start with Darren's questions because they're bound to be similar to what other people have. Come on.
Okay. So I think the question last week in the WhatsApp was it just a Yanni own any karma? So they can only own, they can't acquire any more karma. Okay, so they just have to exhaust what they have.
So why can't they acquire any more? Why can't a Yanni acquire any more karma?
Because they've achieved moksha.
Because they've disidentified with the body.
Yeah.
All right. Adi Shankara spent from verses 45 to about 87 saying, you're not the body, you're not the body. Remember, you're not the body. And so to finally get it, say, I'm not the body means that you're no longer the doer. So therefore, you're not responsible for the actions that the doer does. And therefore, there is no agami karma. Okay, continue.
Yeah. So one of the questions you posted was, is a Yanni Atma? Which is, yes. So we're dipping in and out of dualism to non-dualism. Okay. And then is a Agnani Atman? Well, they are, but they don't yet know it, do they? So how do we answer that one correctly?
So this is all about looking at it from the true perspective. So you can say, first of all, is a wave water? Yes. Is water water? Yes. All right. You both, I mean, somebody can look at something and say it is a wave and this be true. And they can say it is water and that would also be true. It's just from the perspective from which they are speaking. All right. From the perspective of the wave, we know that the wave is anatma. Okay. It is not substantial. The substantiality of the wave belongs to the water and not to nothing, not the name and form that we call a wave. And as a result, this is anatma, this is mithya, all right? But we can still transact with the wave. It's still tangible as a wave. It's just not substantial. So both things are actually there. is from the perspective that we look at. And we look at these two perspectives and we give it our Sanskrit names. And these Sanskrit names now have to be extremely well known to you, because we're going to see them and use them over and over again. So one is the transactional reality, the one that we call Vavaharika Satyam, the transactional reality. The other one was Paramarthika Satyam. So there are two truths here. There is a transactional truth. Is this a pot? Yes, it is a pot. All right? From a transactional point of view. Is it really a pot? No, it's not really a pot. From the Paramarthika, from the absolute reality point of view, it's clay. All right? There are two views of this, depending on whether we look at it from the Vavaharika or the Paramarthika perspective. We can call it vision, which is drishti. So sometimes there's Vavaharika drishti and Paramarthika drishti. I'm trying to find a text here that I can post so that you can read it on the chat line. Here is Paramarthika drishti. Drishti means vision, or if you like, view, perspective, angle. All right. The other one is Vavaharika drishti, and it's spelled this way. These two you need to understand, right? Paramarthika is the absolute vision, the absolute reality, absolute perspective. But Vavaharika is the transactional perspective. These are the two perspectives. When we are in duality, the world around us is from the perspective of a transactional reality. All right? It's very difficult for us to contemplate a non-transactional reality because we're in it the whole time. And therefore, Paramarthika, when you're from a Paramarthika drishti, then there are no transactions. There is only one thing that's Satyam. Everything else is Mithya. So carry on, Darren.
So although a yoni and an agnani, is that right, are both Atma, only a yoni will not have rebirth, but an agnani will have rebirth because they've not identified with the subtle body.
So
Is that right?
Well, no, because the agnani, all right, when it depends on what you look at when you look at a yani or an agnani, all right. So when we look at, say, Adi Shankara, most of you have seen photos of him, all right, a great sage. When you see Adi Shankara, what do you see? Do you see the guy who sat on the leopard skin beside the Ganges teaching people? All right. Do you see the body? Because you can't see the mind. Do you see the body as the person? Or do you see him as pure consciousness? You see him as a body.
I know he's pure consciousness.
You know he's pure consciousness, but how do you see him?
No, he's pure consciousness.
Yes. So you know him as pure consciousness, but you see him as the body. The agnani sees themselves as the body, even sees a yani as the body. Because an agnani means that somebody who's ignorant. Ignorant here is not trying to despise somebody. It's just saying that they're not knowledgeable about Brahmavidyam. They are not knowledgeable about the underlying reality of Brahman. That's what we mean by ignorant person. All right? An agnani is an ignorant person. They do not know about this underlying reality. To them, everything is a transactional reality. And therefore, in order to explain the transactional reality, you have to have a whole backstory. And the doctrine of karma is the backstory. That's why it's called the doctrine of karma. That's why I get amused when people say, is it true? And I say, it's true if you're an Agnani, but if you're a Jnani, it's not true. Because if you're an Agnani, you need to hold on to, how come I'm alive here and I'm going to die? And you say that there's rebirth and I come back and all this karma phalam makes sense. I redesign my life. That's how I live properly and all this sort of thing. And then Advaita Vedanta says there's only one thing. And if there's only one thing, it was never born. And if it was never born, it's not subject to rebirth. If there's only one thing, the Jnani and the Agnani are both that one thing. It's just that the Agnani doesn't realize it. The Agnani requires the story to keep the rest of it, keep all the plates spinning in the air. Jnani doesn't need that. It's a very difficult thing to get. That's why it's been years since I put this onto you. All right? And you're a relative newcomer. There's other people on this group that we haven't actually discussed this in detail. And they've been with me for years. It's a very difficult concept because realization is realization of Advaita Vedanta. It's not realization of all of these little stories of doctrine of karma, bits of Sanskrit, whatever. It's the full realization. There's only one thing. Right? And I'm that. Therefore, if I'm the only one thing, then everything else that appears as everything else must also be me. That's why in Aparokshanubhuti, he spent the first, up to verse 44, to separate myself from the not me. In order to identify what are the not me's in the world. All right? Drik Drisha Viveka is the way we do it. The seer and the seen, the knower and the known. Thus we separate them. And then in the second part, he said, this separation, let's identify these separated anatma, objects of the world, including the mind and body. Let's identify these objects as anatma, and anatma is mithya. Why is it mithya? Because it's not substantial by itself. It's a dependent reality. Dependent upon whom? Dependent on Satyam. Dependent on Brahman. Right? That's why the second half of it, he's carried on saying, you're not this anatma. What is the one single anatma we closest identify with is our body. Right? He didn't spend verses on you're not a bicycle, you're not a car, you're not a fish. He did it, he just said you're not the body. How can the body that has all of these other properties that are different to Atma, how can you possibly be the body? And it got monotonous, it got boring, all right? But he was trying to drive this home. If you're not the body, because the body is anatma, anatma is mithya, and you are satyam. If you're not the body, you can't possibly be any of the other things, because the body is the closest thing with which you're attached. So he spent all that time, and then he thought, when you're now ready to understand that there is only one underlying reality, even the anatma is actually atma, but in a different name and form. Once you've come to understand that, let's talk about a Jnani. Jnani is the person who's come to realize that. And he thinks by verse 89, you should be at that level.
I know there's only one reality, Brahman, and then there's the transactional world. But there's just something missing, like a switch that you need to turn, or maybe like an on-off switch.
Yeah,
go,
it's
ah,
if you realize the logic of a question that says, Ram, I really understand Vedanta. Your classes are great. The notes are fabulous. I think I've really got Vedanta. Do you think I'm going to be reborn? Right. And it means that you haven't understood Vedanta at all.
yeah.
Because if you're really, really understood Vedanta, there is no rebirth because you were not born in the first place.
So you stop asking questions.
You stop asking questions. Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
this is really hard.
It is really hard. Nobody said it was
It
easy.
is like what I think I kind of get what you're saying. I kind of, but why just because a Yarny's become a Yarny and he's not the other one. So why does that stop hit? Why does the ignorant person not get, he stops getting karma, but the ignorant person doesn't if they're all the same thing?
No, the ignorant person doesn't get karma either. It's just that the ignorant person doesn't know that.
Oh, God. Right, okay, right.
Right? They think
Yeah,
that they get karma.
that does actually make more sense, yeah.
Right. They think they get the karma. They think that they die, they're reborn, and the reason that they're reborn is because of their karma. They completely are bought into that story, right? Because we're studying it in this dualistic world. That's the way our brains, our intellect wants to give it an answer. All right. The real answer is so deep, is so fundamental, that is very difficult to grasp from this dualistic standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yes, Maggie.
It came to me in a bit of an aha moment, because we've been going so much about what's anatma and atma, and we've been, negating more and more things, saying it's anatma. And it just came to me as a light bulb moment. Oh my God, but everything is anatma. But I am atma and I manifest everything. Therefore, all anatma must be atma. And it just dropped like a light bulb. Then, of course, I had to unbundle it all, but it really came. But I just have one question. You said that punya and the papa in the agami karma all goes into sanchita karma. So we've got all the beneficial and non-beneficial karma experiences of our lifetime. When we then withdraw our own prarabdha karma, do we actually withdraw some papa? Why would we do that?
Well, you'd withdraw a proportion of what is there. So let's say that you had 50-50 punya papa. Then your withdrawal would be 50-50 punya papa. If you had more punya than papam, then you'd withdraw a greater ratio of punya than papam. And therefore your life would be better than somebody who drew a 50-50 life.
But so you don't really choose
No.
what you're going to withdraw. You're given what's overflowing from there, and then you say, okay, that's my lot.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the other thing to consider in the doctrine of karma. Only in the human life do we accumulate karmic results. We don't do it as inferior plants or animals. We don't do it as superior devas or whatever. Only as a manushya, only as a human being do we accumulate karmic results.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm glad that came to you. And the thing is that these things come in a brief moment, then they sort of fade a little bit, and you have to recapture it and then pump it up again. It's like a bit like a balloon to try and keep the air all together.
That's right. So I felt like it was a bubble, and I caught it, and then it went pop.
Yes. Okay. Any other views
I had a question.
Yes.
So, from either perspective, and I'll just ask the question, although I suspect from one perspective the answer is just, of course not, don't be silly. From either perspective, does the body-mind complex, formerly known as the Ajnani, still be subject to Prarabdha karma?
The Ajnani believes it is subject to Prarabdha karma.
But once the body-mind complex has had an Ajnani become self-realized and disassociate itself from that, the body-mind complex appears to go living on. And is that driven by apparent Prarabdha karma if you were not the Jnani?
The body-mind complex is the same as any other anatma. It is a name and form only. It is a convention that we give to an underlying reality.
And is it driven by conventional Prarabdha karma until the point it expires?
It is driven by this idea of what name and form it should have, is driven by Prarabdha karma, which itself is anatma.
Mm.
All right? Prarabdha karma itself is a name and form of an underlying reality. Why? Because you need a body to be a doer. The doer performs the karma. The karma has the phalam. The phalam, the agami, eventually ends up as prarabdha. If the body, the doer, the karma are anatma, how can the result of the karma be anything but anatma? And therefore, what is anatma? Anatma is mithya. It's a non-dependent reality. Sorry, it is a dependent reality. It is a name and form only. It is a convention. It's an apparent reality. So just as the body and mind is an apparent reality, the prarabdha from which it was formed is also an apparent reality. That is the doctrine of karma.
Tim, just say all is Brahman and then
Tim, stick to your original statement and it'll be much easier. Everything's Brahman. If you take anatma, you see, you can't separate bits of anatma. The Jnani has decided, all right, what is his realization? His realization is that there's nothing but atma, and therefore everything is anatma. Everything that he sees, he can touch, everything out in the world is anatma. All right? Once you say that, you can't say everything's anatma and I'll just keep a little bit of prarabdha karma. It's like saying, I understand now that it is a rope. And that understanding has made the snake go away. It hasn't left the rattle of the snake around, or his fangs are still not lying around on the floor. The entire snake is gone.
Yeah, but this is my point. That is the paramartika drishti.
Yes.
So what you seem to be saying is that there aren't two perspectives. There's paramartika drishti and there's being wrong.
Being wrong is being ignorant, is being an Ajnani. So there is the perspective from which you do not know, and then there's the perspective from which you know. When you don't know, you think that this is a dualistic world. And when you know, you come to realize that it is a non-dual world.
So what I'm saying is in the Vyavaharika drishti, from the belief it is a dualistic world, then is it right to conceive of the body-mind complex that was formerly the Ajnani being driven unto death by Prarabdha karma?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we believe. That's what that's what the scriptures say. And therefore you've got a contradiction here. In some of the Upanishads, it will tell you that there's prarabdha karma and Yoni is subject to prarabdha karma and he gets to Jivan Mukti. And in another set of scriptures, it'll say, no, the Yoni doesn't have prarabdha karma. And later on in this text, Adi Shankara asks this question, why should this be so? And explains it. If there is a question you haven't asked in Vedanta, then the text always asks it so that you can get an answer for it. So that's quite a useful thing. All right. I suspect this is not something that we're going to resolve in one thing, but Janet's got a question that must be answered.
Well, I hope it just follows up from Tim's, because in the text that you wrote, you said that it was said in the text that from the perspective of the Agnani, the Yoni seems to have prarabdha. Their body is still functional and alive. From the perspective of the Yoni, they have no need of that because they have a different perspective.
Yes.
So what I'm understanding here is that it's almost like the doctrine of karma is it, I don't want to call it just a theory for understanding and making sense of your life, but for the Agnani, that's what it is, isn't it? It's a way of making sense of their life.
It is.
But the Yoni has moved on to the underlying theory, everything's Brahman.
Yes.
So I was asking this in my head, right? So if that's what happens when an Agnani sees a Yoni and they say, yep, they've still got prarabdha, they're still alive. What if a Yoni saw a Yoni? What if a Yoni perceived another Yoni?
The Yoni sees everybody else, whether they're a Yoni or an Agnani, and sees every anathema in the world, and understands that it is there for the purposes of transactions, but understands fully well that the underlying reality is Brahman.
So the body mind in which the Yoni is, the body mind that the Yoni is still occupying in the transactional reality is still functioning.
Yes. Thank goodness, otherwise all gurus would be dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it's an apparent prarabdha.
They're functioning. They know it's a transactional world. They know that all the anathema is just name and form. It has utility, right? It has a transactional utility. It is there to be enjoyed, but it is not the underlying reality. It's a dependent reality. But they understand this. That's why they have this little smile on their face. And that's why when something is a dependent reality and is dependent upon you, nothing that is dependent upon you can ever hurt you. Because it is in another order of reality, if you like. It can never hurt you. Right? Nothing that the wave does, nothing that the wave crashes into can ever hurt the water. Nothing that the light actually illumines, whatever it is, how bad it is, whatever the chemical, whatever the radioactivity, it can never hurt the light. In the same way, whatever the Yoni illumines as the anathema in front of them, the transactional world, they know fully well that it has no basis of being able to affect them.
Yeah, so
that is what leads to the elimination of fear and samsara. There is no more fear or samsara. And without fear and samsara, there's just peace, tranquil peace, the elimination of sorrow.
So when does a Yoni know when to die?
Wonderful question. When does a Yoni know when to die?
It's never born, never die.
It never
when
dies.
When does the Yoni's body know when to die?
It's the body is like, when will the pot crack and the water leak out? right? There'll be some point. It has a set life after which the body will go. But the Yoni doesn't care. If it's a true Yoni, he knows that the body will go, but he'll carry on. It happens.
But it's not the end of Prarabdha.
To other people, the body dies and is not subject to rebirth. As far as a Yoni is concerned, he's completely dissociated with the body at that point. It matters little to him or not whether the body lives or not, or how long it lives.
So it will just decay.
Normally, like we are all decaying, yeah. Some of us are worse than others, but yes, we're all decaying, and the 100-year average life that'll happen. Yeah.
But there are some Yanis that have died very young.
Yes.
Why? The bodies. Some Yanis have lost their bodies very young.
Exactly, and so the term that they always say of a great Yoni, they don't say, so and so has died. They say so and so has left their body.
Yeah.
Right. They've sort of finally, but that is even an Agnani statement. Right. For the Yoni, there was no body to leave. But from an Agnani's perspective, this great Yoni has now left his body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can we say that the body-mind has Prarabdha?
The body-mind has Prarabdha. The body-mind is Anatma.
But the Yoni is inhabiting.
Prarabdha is Anatma. They're all having a lovely Anatma party. All right? Believing one name and form looks over their shoulder to another name and form and says, hey, how are you? It's like saying a big wave saying to a little wave, you're a little wave, aren't you? Look how big I am. Right? Yeah, we have relationships, Anatma to Anatma all the time. Open your door and talk to your neighbor. That's an Anatma relationship. As far as they're concerned, all they can see is your mind or your body and your mind expressing through your body in the form of thought, word, and deed. There's very little we can perceive. The visual things through our 5 senses. The body is just about it, and the body of insentient as well as sentient things. And everything else we just fill in. That's why it goes back down to the pot, right? Am I seeing the pot? Yes, right? Does the pot hold water? Yes. Can the pot break? Yes. Is the pot real? No. Right? It's a very simple set of things. Why isn't it real? Because it is just a name that we give to that particular form for clay. That's all it is. And if that pot was made from soft clay, and I bashed it down into a lump, and I made it into a flower, is the flower real? No. The flower is a name that we give to a form of clay that I've currently put as a flower. And where did the pot go? The pot never was. It's a very set of simple statements, yet it's profound. Okay? If you don't believe it, take some plasticine, make yourself a pot, and then crumple it all up and make yourself a little table and ask yourself, where did the pot go? People will think you're absolutely crazy, and they bring in the white suit so that they can wrap you up and take you away. But you know what you're talking about. Daksha, did you have a comment. You leant forward as if to go for the mute button.
Well, I think Janet and Darren, I think the confusion in my mind got answered. The thing that was nagging me once I caught up with last class was I've always been led to believe that a jnani, upon realization, will exhaust his prarabdha karma and then depart the body as we speak. But I think this gives a whole new light to the fact that as an ajnani, I see the body mind in the Mahatma, but for the jnani, he's not the body mind.
No.
And so I think logically, to satisfy the intellect, we use the prarabdha karma example. In fact, after class, I did go and do a lot of reading on Ramana Maharishi, who was asked as a jnani, how come you're suffering from cancer at this point in your life? And his answer, and that makes sense to the ajnani, was this body mind will go through whatever prarabdha karma it has left. But that was, now I see, an appropriate answer for an ajnani, because there's no other way to explain that.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
You got it absolutely right.
So.
You got it absolutely right. And unless you get to a certain level of understanding, even those answers don't make full sense, right? That you read about it. And people with a half-term knowledge, they take those answers and they make their own little story out of it. And it's an incomplete story. But to the jnani, he knows exactly what he said.
And that's why we need your classes.
Well,
to clarify
excellent.
these misunderstandings.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
So Bobby, was that okay for you last week?
Yes, I think all these brilliant questions and discussion has really clarified things, because I think the thing that came up with me was that in one sentence, the jnani has no ego, so he's not a doer. And then in the last sentence, he's there from the standpoint of ego. And now it's very clear that, yes, it's the ego of all the ajnanis. It's all our ego that we see this. So the clarity as this discussion has gone on has just got, the mirror's been cleaned quite a lot in the last 45 minutes. So thank you to everyone.
All right. Well done. Well done. Okay. Are we there yet? All right. Shall we at least do one verse maybe tonight? Just so that, you can have some fresh notes tomorrow, if nothing else. So where were we? We're done, I think, verse 90, and we're about to go into verse 91. Is that correct? All right. So the translation of verse 91 reads, after the origination of the knowledge of reality, prarabdha verily ceases to exist, inasmuch as the body and the like become non-existent, just as a dream does not exist on awaking. So here he's talking about paramaktika drishti, right? I can use the term, it means the perspective of the absolute reality, paramaktika drishti. After the rise of Atmayanam, the knowledge of the self, after realization, when somebody becomes a jnani, there is no prarabdha at all. Prarabdha is accepted to explain the continuity of the jnani's body, which cannot be explained without prarabdha. Prarabdha, if you like, is the fuel for the body. If the body is a flame, the fuel for that body is prarabdha. It's what keeps it burning, keeps it going, without which the body cannot continue. And now Adi Shankara says, the continuity of the body is only from the standpoint of worldly people. From a jnani standpoint, when he has negated the whole world, he has negated the body as well. The body is merely anatma. He's negated everything else in the world as anatma, so he must have negated the body as well. The negation of the body, giving up the body, is but a small thing for a yoni. Because when the world is swallowed up, time is swallowed along with the world. Remember in Katha Upanishad when it was said, if the world is swallowed up, time is yet but a pickle on the side. Remember the phrase? Those who studied it with me. So the yoni does not have to accept prarabdha to explain the body. From the yoni's point of view, there is no body for him. And when the body is the effect, when the kriya, when the karya, the effect is negated, when the body is negated, you no longer need the cause, the karana. When the effect no longer is, you no longer need the cause to explain the negation. All right? When you say it's a wooden table, and then you come to understand that there is no such thing as table, it's just a name and form, it's a concept for wood, then the causality of wood to be able to make a table has now been removed because the table itself has been negated. In the same way, the dream is no more existent after waking. And all aspects of the dream, if you had pain, if you had money in the dream, is instantly gone on waking up. Similarly, on gaining jnanam, the jnani has no prarabdha to affect the jnani at all. Verse 92. That karma, which is done in a previous life, is known as prarabdha, which produces the present life. But such karma cannot take the place of prarabdha for a man of knowledge, as he has no other birth, being free from ego. So in the first argument, it was said that prarabdha is required to explain the continuity of the yani's body. In the yani's vision, he has negated the body, and therefore he doesn't talk about prarabdha is the cause of the body. All right? The first argument. The second argument given is that prarabdha is the result of actions done in a previous birth, in a prior birth. The consequences of actions done in a present birth is called agami. Sanchita is born out of previous births, but is not relevant here. The yani has negated all his births on gaining Atmayanam. And when a yani says, I have no birth, when a yani says, I have no birth, which birth is he talking about? Right? We think that when a yani says that, what he's saying is that I will not be reborn. I've become free of rebirth. But a yani will actually say, I've never had a past birth. I don't have a present birth. And that's why I will have no future birth. How can I be reborn when I wasn't born in the first place? That's what the yani means when he says that I have no birth. What is birth? Birth is nothing but the union of the physical, the gross, and the subtle body, all right, with consciousness. Dropping the gross and subtle body is death. Now, when a yani says all the three sharirams, all the physical, the subtle, and the causal body, when he says all the three bodies are but mithya, how can he be associated with any of them? So a Yoni does not have any Janma at all. No past birth, no present birth, no future birth. That is from a Yani's own perspective. Right? So Vedanta says there is no birth at all. Once one understands Vedanta, one understands that there isn't any birth at all, and therefore the question of next birth never arises. Prarabdha is born out of Purva Janma, previous births, and when I have negated the Purva Janma, the previous births themselves, where is the question of Purva Janma, previous births, Prarabdha? When I've negated it, where is the question of the Prarabdha from it? Prarabdha is a result of actions done in Purva Janma, prior births. But in a Yani's vision, Purva Janma, past births, are not there. Future Janmas are not there. And therefore Prarabdha is not there at any time. Remember, now that you're coming to know, when you qualify birth with the adjective past, present, or future, you say past birth, Purva Janma. You say this current birth, the present birth, you say the future birth. When you qualify birth in that way, it is understood that you have not understood Vedanta at all. So Vedanta says there is no birth. If there's one underlying reality of Advaita Vedanta, there can be no birth. Because if there's only one thing, it has no death. It was never born. Verse 93. Just as the body in a dream is superimposed and therefore illusory, so is also this body. How could there be any birth of the superimposed body? And in the absence of birth of the body, where is the room for that prarabdha at all? So this verse is an explanation of the previous one. And Adi Shankara has said that there is no purva janma, there is no previous birth at all for the Yani. Now he says why there is no previous birth. For this, we need to know the definition of birth, which is the acquisition of a physical body. Birth is not the creation of anything new. Right? We've seen that nothing can be created or destroyed. This is as true for scientific truth as it is a shastric statement. Nothing can be created or destroyed, but merely changed in form. Janma, birth, is nothing but association of Atma with the physical body. Death is dissociation from a particular body. And rebirth is association with another physical body. And here Adi Shankara says that there is no question of purva janma, past birth, association. There's no question when purva janma is negated, there is no question of rebirth. There's no question of dissociation with the body to die and be reborn again. I cannot have association, I cannot have dissociation with a non-existent thing. The gross body is not there. It's wrongly perceived as a substance. It's anatma. It's not substantial. In other words, it is unreal. And he gives the example of the dream body. In a dream, we see so many people, we live the dream through this dream body that we've created. I'm there in the dream, in my dream body. And whatever is the number of contacts with people and things, whatever that storyline I have within the dream, that I've lived through this dream body, it all goes into thin air once a person wakes up from the dream into the waking state. It's all gone, including the superimposed body that I'd created for myself in the dream body. It's all evaporated. It's all gone. The fortune I made in bitcoins in the dream, it's all gone on waking. The dream body is superimposed on the waker. That is, the waker gets a false association with the dream body, and the association is false because the associated object itself is false. So the association of the waker to the dream body, that association is false because the whole idea of a dream body is false. How can you be associated with something that is non-existent? The dream body never existed. He says, in the same way, the waker's body is also superimposed or falsely perceived, and it is also unreal. You might say, hang on a minute, Ram. I don't feel that this body is unreal. I can pinch myself. It's very tangible to me. It's tangibly real. For this, we say, remember, did the dream body feel real in the dream? When you're in the dream, as far as you're concerned, that dream body is entirely real. Right? Just like the waking body, the Jagrat Deha. The waking body is real. All right? So it feels in exactly the same way, but during the dream body goes off and you wake up. When you wake up to a higher reality. A higher reality, because the lower reality of the dream has now been totally falsified. When you come to Bhavaharika, the transactional reality, the subjective or apparent reality becomes falsified. Similarly, this Bhavaharika world can be falsified when I wake up to Paramartika, the absolute reality. And Adi Shankara says, Deha, the body, is not a substantial thing. It's not a substantial body. It's only a nama rupa. It's a name and form that is subject to change. If this dreamer or waker's body is falsely perceived, how can you talk of the origination of an unreal entity? Right? It's very much like, let's go back for a bit. It's like talking about the rope snake's birthday. Right? When was the snake born? The more I provide a date, or the color of his eyes, the length of his fangs, the more I add reality to an unreal thing. The more I say, I could have sworn it had green eyes, menacing green eyes, and it had little hoods above his eyes. All right? I'm adding reality to an unreal thing. Initially, the rope snake appeared to be so real that I talked about these things. For the satisfaction of the perceiver, the Guru says the snake is there. And then slowly, on gaining the confidence of the student, the guru asks the student to inquire about the validity of the snake that he's taking as a reality. Once the jnani sees that the world is unreal, where is the question of taking the world to be real? He's already seen it as unreal. The world and time are inseparable. The world and time itself are intertwined. To talk about the birth of the world, we have to talk about the birth of time. But to talk about the birth of time, we have to have another time. Time started with the Big Bang. You can't say the Big Bang was at 7:43 on a Thursday, 4.3 billion years ago. Because in order to do that, you need to know on whose clock you were noting the time of the birth of the Big Bang. We use the word Maya for the unreal thing. Where is the question of birth of a superimposed body? Jnani has no birth. Then where is the question of karma for a jnani? When there is no karma, there's no question of prarabdha. When karma isn't there, karma generating prarabdha cannot be there either. I think this is just further to what we were discussing before class. But I'm going to leave you with this. Verse number 94. Vedanta texts declare ignorance to be verily the material cause of the phenomenal world, just as clay is of a pot. That ignorance being destroyed, where can the universe subsist? So we've had two reasons why there's no prarabdha. This is the third reason being given. And Adi Shankara gives the example of the pot and clay. Why not? Now we see the pot as a substantial entity because we don't know that clay alone is the substance. Right? That's in ignorance. We see this as a substantial entity. We say it has a substance of its own. Right? As long as I don't understand the substantiality of the clay, I falsely transfer the substantiality of the clay to the pot. Shall I say that again? As long as I don't understand the substantiality of the clay, I falsely transfer the substantiality of the clay to the pot. In other words, I transfer substantiality of clay to a name and form or pot. Right? And I look upon the pot as though it's a substance. Do you understand? I've taken the substantiality of the clay and I've superimposed it on a name and form. The substantiality of the pot is not because it is a fact, but because of the ignorance of the substantial clay. Right? The fact that this pot in my hand is being treated as being substantial is because I have ignorance of the substantiality of the clay from which it is made. Right? This ignorance of mine alone is forcing me to attribute the substantiality to the pot. Right? So you can say, it's the ignorance of the clay that's leading to the substantiality of the pot. Right? The pot, the effect, the cause of this pot is ignorance of clay. As long as clay ignorance continues, the substantiality of the pot will continue. Until such time when I understand the substantiality of the clay and that the pot is nothing but name and form, I will falsely continue to think that the pot has substantial existence. The whole of Vedanta is a series of understandings and the consequent perspective change. It's just a sequence of them that's presented coherently one after the other. Ignorance is the cause of substantiality, the reality of the pot. Think about it. How profound that is. It's the ignorance that is the cause of the reality of the pot. In the wake of knowledge, the ignorance goes. And the pot is like a deflated balloon as we come to know the mithyaness of the pot. That is not a substantial entity. Right? Similarly, the world also becomes mithya as the ignorance goes when I become a jnani. It's the ignorance of an agnani that is the cause of the substantiality of the world. Right? There is no question of anathma enjoying substantiality of its own. When I negate the world, how can the body be real? It can't be. The body is part of the world. I'll repeat. Ignorance is the cause of the substantiality of the world. Or if you like, the reality attributed to the world is caused by ignorance. It is the cause, and the reality of the world is the effect. Right? Now, this is not known by human intellect. You can't sit there in meditation and come to this conclusion. It is only known through Vedanta or the Shastra that we come to know that matter is not substantial. And Shastra introduces consciousness as the real stuff of the universe, with all matter being unreal, all matter being mithya. Right? And the reality that we attribute to all of this mithya anathma is as a result of the ignorance that we have of the underlying reality of consciousness. And so by way of example, Adi Shankara wants to say that just as the clay is the cause of the pot, Brahman is the cause of the whole creation. When the ignorance of the cause is gone, where is the question of the world, which is nothing but a verbal or nominal existence? Have you been able to follow the argument? I will when I read your notes, Ram. Any product is merely a word initiated by your tongue. Anything has existence because of what you utter, and it is but a name and form. What is real or substantial is Brahman, which is the essence of the whole world and of all creation. It's an interesting third example that he gives. That ignorance is the cause of the substantiality of the world. Just as ignorance of the clay is the cause of the substantiality of the pot, ignorance of Brahman is the cause of the substantiality of this anathma, this world, including our body-mind. Right. Now it starts to make a bit more sense when we draw these diagrams. And at the top level is ignorance, Maya, that produces this apparent reality of subtle bodies and physical bodies below it. As you study more and more of these texts, just little bits of it get stuck into a wall, and the wall starts to get a bit stronger. That's why we study so many texts from so many different perspectives. And Adi Shankara does it in quite a simple way. Other people do it in a slightly more complex way. We're studying the simple ones. Any questions from that? Do people still feel that I banged them on the head this week after banging them on the head last week? You're getting that. You have to understand, the only reason you're being told this is because you have elevated yourself as a student to a level where this is the next challenging thing that you have to come to grips with. Right? It shows progress. You're on top table. May not feel like it, but you're on top table. There's very few people on the planet that get to hear this, or indeed can make any sense out of it when they've heard it. It's a privilege to have human birth and to be able to contemplate such things. Questions?
If we ask a question, that makes us an Agnani.
It's only through, remember, you've heard the Shravanam, now the Mananam. The elimination of doubt is what turns an Agnani to a Jnani. And Vedanta encourages that again and again and again. That's why the live teacher is so very important, because you can get that feedback. Yeah. But it is to be contemplated, and to be contemplated deeply. It's not a superficial thing, because it's a change in perspective. It's not something that you can see and touch with your senses, right? It's a complete change in perspective. And it's a change in perspective as we continue to live in a grihastha life, right? Still got to make the cocoa and go to bed and get up in the morning and brush the teeth and say, I'm Brahman brushing my teeth, all right? We have to live in this grihastha life and surrounded by people who have no clue what they're contemplating. But this is a personal journey. It's never about other people. It never was.
I think I've made the mistake of I've gone from, and I know I'm not the body. I'm not the body. I'm the mind. I'm still at. I'm the mind. I'm the subtle body, and sometimes travel up, and I sometimes come back down. I need to jump to the next level.
Yeah, that's why he spent sort of 50 verses saying you're not the body.
But I'm not the mind also.
You're not the mind either. That's
but I'm still
I
thinking
know.
of myself as a mind, and then I'm Atma, and then I come back down and then go back up.
Right. And it is because of this reason. All right. What is that process within you? this is to everyone, that allows you to think. The contemplation, the intellect that you're driving right now in trying to understand what I'm saying, what is it that is illuminating your thought process?
Consciousness.
Consciousness, but what type of consciousness?
Reflected.
Reflected consciousness. So everything that you're trying to currently understand is with consciousness, which is not the real thing. It's just a reflected form of it. Because that's the one that's playing out in your mind, that's illuminating your thoughts, that allow you to understand the words that are being said and the words that you read. So we're going through this process of trying to understand who we are by having borrowed a little bit of consciousness and trying to utilize that to work it all out. That's why we feel so that it is our mind. It is our mind thinking this. Because it is our mind thinking this. But we're thinking about the fact that I can think in this way with reflected consciousness means that there must be an original. Right? The thinking is not me. The thinking is my subtle body that I come to know because of the illumination that I provide onto that thought process. The thinking is not me. When I feel sad, when I feel happy, when I feel elated, that aha moment, that thought is not me. It is that by which that thought was known is me. And it's known in our mind with a reflected consciousness. Imagine we know such profound things with a little bit of reflected light. Imagine what the total light is like. Okay? That's enough. That's enough pickled brain for one night, I think. Okay. Any other questions before we go into our closing prayer? Okay, I'll mute you all. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishtate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.